Shalom. This week we are reading Parashat Balak. Parashat Balak, should I say, Anti-Semitism 101, or perhaps Anti-Semitism version 2012. This Torah portion is so amazing, and it seems that the very roots, perhaps the cause, the deepest understanding of the motivation of hatred of the people of Israel can be found here in this Torah portion, and nothing is really new under the sun. The first thing that strikes us in Parashat Balak is a very unlikely alliance between unlikely allies. And Balak, the son of Zippor, was king of Moab at that time, and he sent messengers to Bilaam, son of Beor, and the message was, behold, a people has come out of Egypt. It's covered the surface of the earth, and it sits opposite me. So now, please come and curse this people for me, for it is too powerful for me. Perhaps I will be able to strike it and drive it away from the land, for I know that whomever you bless is blessed, and whomever you curse is accursed. So first of all, the goal of Balak and Bilaam and this, I say, unlikely alliance between Midian and Moab, because actually they hated each other from the get-go. They were actually sworn enemies from the very beginning, but their common hatred and fear and loathing of the people of Israel brought them together. So it seems that they weren't interested in exterminating the people of Israel or really doing away with them, but just making sure that they would not go into the land. Please come curse this people for me, and perhaps I will be able to strike it and drive it away from the land. And just like today, modern, acceptable, even noble, prize-winning anti-Semitism, it's not about the Jewish people. It's about the Zionists. It's about the problems going on in the land of Israel, the root cause of all the world's problems. In Syria, they may be slaughtering countless civilians. All the other problems that are going on, it all seems to be about the settlements and about the Judaization of Jerusalem and all the other problems. But who was this man Bilaam that Balak wanted to hire? Bilaam was an amazing, powerful dream twister, mass manipulator. He was a great philosopher. He was a very deeply religious man. He was a great thinker. He was an academic. He was a media pundit. He was all of these things because our sages of blessed memory always have the deepest insight and reveal to us the secrets of the Torah. And they tell us very enigmatically some things about this man Bilaam. He was a great heathen prophet, really the only one, because you know that prophecy was given over only to the people of Israel, but so as to make sure that there's no excuse in the future where, the nations could say, well, if only we would have had a prophet, we would have been as good also. So God gave them this prophet, Bilaam, and, well, he could have really been a very great man. He had potential. He, in fact, our sages say, was so great that the Torah really could have been delivered through him. Could have taken the people of Israel out of Egypt. So he's kind of set up like a twinner to Moshe. He had this messianic potential even. He could have used his greatness for holiness. But instead, he twisted everything up, and he learned how to manipulate God, as it were, if such a thing could be said. He knew exactly how to aim his evil intent, and apparently he was a very sought-after speaker in the university campus circuit, where, of course, everybody today speaks most openly about the problem of the people of Israel. It's all coming from the universities. He was very sought after because apparently he knew how to aim, and when he said something, it stuck. This is what Balak told him. I know that whoever you curse will be cursed. So he was all of these things. And just as it is today, we see that anti-Semitism wears so many garbs. We have the religious garb. Bilaam was an extremely religious man. He says a number of times, I can't go against Hashem, my God, if Hashem, the Lord, same name that the Torah uses for Hashem himself, tells me to do it, I will, but otherwise I would never dream of trying to do something on my own. But of course, God himself does not associate his name with Bilam. In fact, he uses the name Elohim, the name of harshness, and Vayikar, the word bespeaks God happened upon him in a chance meeting at night, didn't want to be seen. But Bilam, very presumptuous, very forward, he says, I can't go against the word of Hashem, my God, just as today there are churches that, in the name of religion, call for divesting from Israel. There are great humanitarians, philanthropists, all sorts of people who, in the name of human rights and in the name of everything holy and everything pure and noble, Nobel Prize winners amongst them, people who write all sorts of books and all sorts of things like that, they all point at Israel as being the biggest problem. So here, our sages, thousands of years ago, described Bilam as being a deeply religious man, as being the greatest philosopher, a great thinker, a writer. He was also a great emancipator. He really was motivated by the highest kind of drive for equality, for democracy, and all sorts of things like that. So there's a certain template here that's been established in the words of Bilam. And perhaps if we can understand what Bilam and Balak and Midian and Moab were really all about and what really bothered them about Israel going into her land, perhaps we'll understand the root cause of the same phenomena that we have today that still wears the same garbs that Bilam chose to disguise himself in. So this idea really of the fear of Israel going into the land, I mean, that's really the cause of this fear, loathing, hatred. Same thing today. What does that mean to the world? What's the problem of Israel going into her land? Translated today as having sovereignty over Jerusalem, building communities, homes for Jewish people throughout the land. Such a small area, so minuscule really, and so totally disproportionate to the rest of the world. What is this really all about? Well, what it's really all about, it's about bringing the Shekhinah, the divine presence, into the world. It's about being a force for holiness and righteousness. It's about bringing a balance of physical and spiritual and proving to the world that yes, we are limited. We have a physical confinement in this world. We're physical people, but you know what? There's a God in the world. And he says otherwise. He says that everything can be elevated. He says that we can live a life of nobility. And that's what people are afraid of. People are afraid, the enemies of Israel, unabashedly are afraid of what Israel really is bringing to the world. And that's what Bilam and Balak wanted to stop, and that's what those who carry on and continue their legacy today are also concerned about Israel going into the land, making it Jewish, bringing these values out to people. Because it's one thing to die, a righteous death. Everybody wants to be righteous. Show me someone who knows how to live it. That's the idea. The idea is we're not supposed to die, we're supposed to live. But what did Bilam say? And this is really interesting because, you know, he uttered these curses. That's what he tried to do, but they were turned into blessings in his mouth because God said, you know, go with those men, but they're not cursed. They're blessed people. And so you can't curse them. So one of the enigmatic, amazing utterances of the heathen prophet Bilam was, who has counted the dust of Jacob or numbered a quarter of Israel? May my soul die the death of the upright, and may my end be like his. So he looked at the nobility of the death of a tzaddik, of a righteous person, the way Israel relates to death, and he says that is so noble. I wish I could have that kind of a heritage. I wish I could die the death of the righteous. That was a very lucid moment, and it was very candid and honest of him. But notice, Bilam didn't say, I wish I could live like them. I wish I could live the life of the righteous. So, you know, this actually all ties together with something going on in our time, the translation of all of this into our current events, because of course we know that as we study the Torah and as the portions unfold, we are reading the saga of our very own lives. So, speaking of Egypt, as Balak was complaining that, behold, a people has come out of Egypt. So you know that we have seen the beauty, the delicacy, the humanitarianism and democracy of the Arab Spring. And the Arab Spring has brought us a presidency in Egypt of the Muslim Brotherhood, the same Muslim Brotherhood whose head recently, before the election, expressed himself with the statement, Israel's creation is the worst catastrophe to ever hit the world. And of course, the Muslim Brotherhood has a credo, and that reads, God is our objective, the Quran is our law, the Prophet is our leader, jihad is our way, and death for the sake of God is the highest of our aspirations. And you know, that so reminds me of Bilam's utterance, I wish I could die the death of the righteous. This is such a non-Jewish idea, because the Torah compels us to be enamored of life and to live life to the fullest and to want to live and to aspire to make life count, to worship life really, as opposed to a cult of the worship of death, which obviously Bilam subscribed to, as does the Muslim Brotherhood. The same Muslim Brotherhood which brought about the revolution in Egypt, during which foreigners, Christians, Jews, women, Westerners of all stripes were targeted, churches were burned, non-Muslim families were killed, women were dragged out and raped, and in fact, CBS reporter Lara Logan was raped repeatedly by a mob of more than 200 men on the very night that Mubarak's government fell, which was actually supported by the United States of America. Speaking of unlikely alliances, so the morning of June 25th, 2012, President Obama called the new president of Egypt, Mohamed Morsi, representing the Muslim Brotherhood, who, by the way, is an academic, educated in the University of Southern California with a degree in engineering. President Barack Obama called him to congratulate him on his new presidency, the very same party that calls the creation of Israel the worst catastrophe in the history of the world, the very same party that is responsible for those events that we described. So, are you good at math? If you are, and you can do this math, you can ask yourself about this most unlikely alliance and thinking about this people, Israel, who went out from Egypt and who is to go forth into the land of Israel to bring the message of life, the worship of life, the appreciation of life, the living God, the Shekhinah, to bring that message into the world. And we look at the tremendous fear and antipathy of Bilam and Balak and the alliance of Midian and Moab, and look at the world today, the international community that's so concerned with the Zionist entity, that's so concerned with the violations of human rights that are going on in the land of Israel, while turning a blind eye to every type of atrocity that's being committed in the name of human rights and democracy, and that's being espoused and made noble and made into a cause by all those who wear the religious and academic and intellectual and philosophical garbs of Bilam himself. And all we can do is remember God's admonition to Bilaam that you will not curse this people because they are blessed. And after all, the bottom line is that some of the most beautiful blessings ever uttered for Israel came from the mouth of Bilaam.